الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. نرحب بكم في سلسلة المتحدثين لحاضنة قطر للأعمال ضمن برنامج فعالية للأعمال الانسيابية. ننوه الحضور بأن هناك ترجمة فورية متوفرة لغير الناطقين باللغة الإنجليزية. كما ننوه أن هناك ستكون استراحة للصلاة إن شاء الله في تمام الساعة 6:55 أما الآن يشرفني أن أدعو السيد حمد دشن القحطاني المدير العام لحاضنة قطر للأعمال لإلقاء كلمته الترحيبية إلى المنصة، فليتفضل مشكورا.
سادة الحضور، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اسمحوا لي أولا أن أرحب بجميع الحضور والشركاء ورواد الأعمال والأصدقاء وأسرة الحاضنة وفريق بنك قطر للتنمية. يسعدني استضافتكم اليوم في هذه الجلسة الخاصة من سلسلة المتحدثين لنحتفل معا بالذكرى الخامسة من تأسيس حاضنة قطر للأعمال. طوال فترة ال5 سنوات السابقة عملت الحاضنة بكل فخر وجهد على تمكين المئات من رواد الأعمال من خلال العديد من البرامج الريادية الأكثر نجاحا من نوعها، وذلك بما يتوافق مع ركيزة التنمية الاقتصادية برؤية قطر الوطنية 2030 التي تهدف إلى تعزيز القطاع الخاص. نحرص في الحاضنة على التطور باستمرار من أجل تلبية جميع احتياجات رواد الأعمال المحليين، فنحن نستمد شغفنا والتزامنا من قصص نجاحهم التي تدفعنا إلى البحث عن طرق جديدة لدعم الشركات الناشئة وتعزيز منظومة ريادة الأعمال في دولة قطر. يسعدنا اليوم أن نعلن عن إطلاق 2 من أحدث برامجنا الريادية، وهما برنامج المرشد الانسيابي وبرنامج التصنيع الانسيابي. برنامج المرشد الانسيابي هو الأول من نوعه في قطر، صمم خصيصا لتطوير الجيل القادم من المرشدين المعتمدين وتزويدهم بالمهارات التي تمكنهم من المساعدة في تحويل الشركات الناشئة الواعدة إلى شركات ناجحة، حيث سيتم تزويد منتسبي البرنامج بمفهوم شامل حول المراحل التي تمر بها الشركات الناشئة والاحتياجات التنموية الرئيسية في كل مرحلة من مراحل نموها. أما برنامج التصنيع الانسيابي فقد تم إطلاقه خصيصا لتطوير وبناء قدرات الشركات القائمة والشركات الناشئة التي تقوم بتصنيع أو تهدف لتصنيع المنتجات والسلع في قطر. سنحرص في هذا البرنامج على تزويد المنتسبين بالمهارات والمعرفة اللازمة لتوسيع نطاق عملياتهم الصناعية بكفاءة وتنميتها من خلال سلسلة من الجلسات العملية التي تعتمد على المنهج الانسيابية. وقد خصصنا مساحة خاصة داخل القاعة للإجابة على جميع استفساراتكم بخصوص هذه البرامج الجديدة من خلال مختصين من فريق عمل حاضنة. وكجزء من مهمة الحاضنة الكاملة في تطوير قادة الأعمال المستقبليين عن طريق التعلم من أذكى وأنجح العقول في العالم، برزت جلسة سلسلة المتحدثين كواحدة من أفضل المنصات التي تمكن رواد الأعمال البارزين دولياً من مشاركة خبراتهم العملية مع رواد الأعمال المحليين وإلهامهم من أجل تنمية ورفع مستوى أعمالهم. نستضيف اليوم السيد بورتر إيرزمان، نائب الرئيس السابق لمجموعة علي بابا، حيث كان من أوائل المنضمين للشركة فور انتقال مقرها من شقة المؤسس جاك ما، وبصفته خبيراً في التجارة الإلكترونية في الأسواق الناشئة. عمل بورتر كمستشار في آسيا وأفريقيا وأمريكا اللاتينية، وتم عرض فيلمه الوثائقي عن شركة علي بابا في 15 مهرجانا دوليا للأفلام. تعد هذه المرة الأولى التي يقوم فيها السيد بورتر بزيارة دولة قطر، لذا أدعوكم جميعا لتنضموا لي في الترحيب به.
So thank you very much. This is very exciting for me to be here. Most of my career was spent in China, with a lot of that time in Shanghai. So when I was in Shanghai, I used to look across the river there at Pudong, and I saw a giant city just come up from flat land, really what it felt like overnight. And I said, this must be the most exciting place in the world. This is my first trip to Qatar. I realized actually this is also the most exciting place in the world, because everywhere I look, it gives me that same feeling of what I saw in Shanghai when I was there, of a city really growing up from the desert. And the one thing I know, I've only been here 24 hours, the one thing I know we have in common is that we're both living at exciting places at exciting times. And so we're very lucky to be in that situation. And of course, beyond just the cities growing up, an exciting thing is happening in the world, which is the digital revolution and the internet. And so what I hope today is I can share with you some of my experience working at Alibaba, and also share with you the lessons I learned, and hopefully spark some ideas for the entrepreneurs here. My favorite group to speak to is groups of entrepreneurs or people who are supporting entrepreneurs. So I've been really looking forward to this for a long time. I want to start today just posing a question, which is, where will the next Facebook come from? Or for that matter, where will the next Amazon come from? Or for that matter, the next Google, or even the next Alibaba. So I'm here to tell you today that I honestly believe in my heart that it could very easily come from here in Doha. Now, I think if I was just anybody telling you that, you might say, oh, thanks for the kind words and the well wishes. But keep in mind, I'm someone who saw a school teacher build a global company from a second-tier city in China. So what I really realized is that in the internet era, all you need is a human brain and the internet connection, and you can build a global business. So hopefully by the end of my talk, you'll agree with me if you don't already believe this. So I want to share a little bit more about myself, just so you understand where I'm coming from. As was mentioned, I worked in Alibaba from the early days. Although I wasn't a co-founder, I did join right as the company moved out of the founder Jack Ma's apartment. And I saw this company grow from his apartment into now what's almost a $500 billion e-commerce company that in many measures is the largest in the world. And when I left the company about 10 years ago, right before I left, I sat down with Jack Ma, the founder, and I said, Jack, I've witnessed something that I think is very inspiring. I want to share it with people around the world, with other entrepreneurs. I want people to know you can build a global business from anywhere. Would you be okay if I told this story in a book or a documentary? And he started his career as a teacher, and he said, Porter, you're probably in the best position to do this. You're a foreigner working inside Alibaba. You saw the outside of the company, you saw the inside from the international and the China perspective. So he gave me his blessing. And I said, but Jack, you do realize, don't you, I'm going to tell the good and the bad, the successes as well as the mistakes, all in my own words. And he said, Porter, go ahead. I trust you to tell the story in a way that will help entrepreneurs. So I made a documentary film, which at the end of this talk, I'll tell you how you can download it for free, called Crocodile in the Yangtze. Then I wrote a book, Alibaba's World, and then most recently a book called 6 Billion Shoppers, which is about e-commerce, the e-commerce boom in emerging markets. The first book, the Alibaba one's been translated into 15 languages, but not yet Arabic. So we're in a media center here with Arabic speakers. If you know a publisher, I'd love to have daylight. And so I have for you a 2-minute video clip, which I think will show you that Alibaba, just an office meeting at Alibaba for the company, is just like an office meeting in any other company. So I'm going to show you a 2-minute video clip to show you what a typical day was like at Alibaba.
It was an amazing feeling to look around Yellow Dragon Stadium and see that our team had grown to fill 16,000 seats. It was hard to believe that this was the same Chinese internet company I joined 10 years earlier, just as it moved out of a small apartment. And leading us through our improbable journey was this former English teacher, Jack Ma. In 1999, he and 17 friends had started Alibaba.com in his apartment. I greeted Jack as he walked in. I had worked as a vice president at his company for nearly 10 years, as our team survived the internet bubble, fought a war with eBay, and managed to build China's first global internet company. I settled into my seat and wondered, how would Jack address us on this important night? And then, just like any other billionaire in the same situation, Jack took the stage.
Okay, so maybe it wasn't like just any company meeting. This was our all-hands company meeting with employees that I attended. Luckily, I see a lot of stadiums being built in Qatar, so I think you have many places to host your company meetings in 10 years as well. So how did Jack get to that point? Well, Jack Ma actually started with very humble beginnings. He grew up in a place called Hangzhou in China. It was sort of a second-tier city, but it was famous for a lake. And so at a time when China was not open to outside visitors, the Chinese government did allow tourists to go to the West Lake in his hometown of Hangzhou. And Jack Ma, in China, people think he looks a little different. And actually, he was sort of bullied as a child growing up. And so one of the things he did, just to sort of have an escape and see other things, was he would go to the West Lake in Hangzhou and meet foreigners who would come to walk around the West Lake. And he did it because he was curious about other cultures, about other languages, and he wanted to practice his English. So he really learned English walking around the lake with different foreigners he met. So he absorbed at that time not only the language, but also the culture. And then when it was time for him to choose a career, he said, I love English, I love international cultures, so he decided to become an English teacher. He went to school to become an English teacher, was an English teacher for 5 years, but then he said to himself, you know, everything I teach is something I learned from books, but it's not from real life experience. And he saw around him that manufacturing was starting to take off, and so he decided to start a company himself. His first company was a translation company. It did pretty well. His second company was called China Pages. It was actually China's first internet company. It did okay, but eventually wasn't a huge success. So Jack went to work for the government in Beijing, and in 1999, when e-commerce started to really take off, or at least the internet started to take off in China, he decided he wanted to start a company again. So he started Alibaba. And it's interesting, when I come around this part of the world, everyone thinks the story of Alibaba is from their hometown because it's something that everyone's familiar with. But the reason Jack chose the name Alibaba was because it was a story people around the world knew, and he wanted to build a global company from day one. So when I was growing up, I even read about Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. And in China, it's a well-known story. And what Jack Ma, his key insight he had is he saw that the internet was going to create a sort of open sesame to a treasure cave, so that entrepreneurs could find treasure online. So from those humble beginnings, Alibaba has now grown to, as I said, almost a $500 billion valued company. And if you want any sense of just the scale of the company, I could bore you with all kinds of numbers and graphs, but let me just talk about one day. It was Singles Day, a shopping festival that Alibaba created, which has now become an annual shopping festival. And last year they held this on November 11th. And Singles Day is kind of an answer to Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day couples can celebrate, and in China, Singles said, okay, 11/11, it's like a singles just standing there all alone. We'll create just a festival for single people because we deserve a holiday too. Well, it grew to become a major shopping holiday. And last year, Alibaba's Singles Day shopping holiday, here are some of the numbers. In 24 hours, $30 billion of products were sold on Alibaba's websites alone. That's more than the US total sales of Black Friday, Cyber Monday combined. 1 billion orders were processed, and actually transactions from about 230 countries and regions, and you can see some of the top countries here. And very importantly is that it's really put a shopping mall in every pocket. Last 2 years ago on the Singles Day, 90% of the sales were on mobile devices. So today, because I'm always curious about the shopping situation in a local market, I went out to the Mall of Qatar. And just imagine a giant mall like that in your pocket on a smartphone. That's really what Alibaba and Jack Ma created, but with the biggest shopping holiday in the world. So how did this happen? Today I'm going to talk about the rise of Alibaba, the e-commerce boom in emerging markets, and how it's a little bit different from the e-commerce boom in the developed markets. And then I'm going to talk through some of the entrepreneurial lessons I learned working alongside Jack Ma. So first, let's start with how e-commerce evolved in the United States, because that's where it really took off first. And it's important to understand the evolution of retail in the US, because that's where it really became the most efficient in the early days. So how did retail in the US evolve? Well, here's a picture of some shops out in my home state of Colorado. And of course, the United States, a giant sprawling country, back 200 years ago, retail was done in a lot of these little general stores. And they were kind of spread around the country. The selection wasn't great, and the shop owner would take 40 to 50% profit margin from every sale. Well, over about 200 years that evolved, and it evolved into shopping malls and big box retailers that specialize in certain products. And then of course, the likes of Walmart, giant retailers. Obviously here you have Carrefour. But along in about 1995, when the internet really came along, you can see that the US was already a very mature, sophisticated retail infrastructure. Walmart was using technology to do a lot of great things to make their business very efficient. So it was a very easy and natural step when Amazon came along. And what Amazon did was basically say, you know what, everything Walmart does, we can do online with our storefront online. So we can build a company from scratch that's just as efficient and even more efficient and do it all online. And the reason I'm stressing this is because often people study on model. And of course, in 2000, there was another company called eBay. And when I was sitting in Beijing, working in the internet industry in 2000, I remember people saying, who will emerge as the champ globally? And there was an assumption it would be one of two companies that would basically dominate all of global e-commerce, either Amazon or eBay. Now, this is very different from how things evolved in China, and in fact, emerging markets in general. I think here in Qatar, there's probably a blend of the two. So yesterday I went to Souk Waqif, I'm probably saying it wrong, but I went to, because I love everywhere I go to visit those types of bazaars and markets. And the minute I saw it, I said, this is a country when I talk, people will understand what I'm talking about. In the US, if you talk about this type of shopping culture, people still don't know. What is this like? You go, you haggle, you build a relationship, you make deals. Well, immediately when I saw the Souk Waqif here, I said, okay, people in Qatar will know what I'm talking about. Because China, in a lot of ways, back when I arrived, was doing business and retail the same way retail is done at Souk Waqif. So China, really, after communism started to open up China, as reforms came in, China's retail infrastructure was very, very inefficient. So China had its own little shops, like I showed you in the US, but that was about it. There wasn't much retail. And so in 1999, it was against this backdrop, where imagine all there was a souk waqif. There wasn't these beautiful retail malls around. Against the backdrop in China in 1999, Jack Ma pulled his co-founders in to his apartment. And I remember people saying at that time, e-commerce will never work in China. And the reasons that they listed were that first, only about 10 million people are using the internet. Second, people don't use credit cards, or didn't use credit cards in China then. And people assumed you had to have credit cards in order for e-commerce to take off. And then third, they said, well, we have very poor logistics, and then government controls of the internet. And a very important one was people in China didn't trust each other. So if you think about it, e-commerce depends on a buyer and seller trusting each other. And without that trust, people assumed China would never have e-commerce between strangers. And then finally, people said, well, all of the internet experts are in Silicon Valley, so of course you can't have an internet company succeed here. We don't have the experts. So it's against this backdrop that Jack Ma's full video clip of that first day speech, so you can get a sense of how Jack Ma addressed his team in the face of these challenges.
5年的时候，我记得我做出的决定，我自己跟自己讲，我可能改变自己是一辈子所从事的事业。而今天，我想把大家请过来，跟大家共同探讨以后至少5年、10年我们要做的事情。那么阿里巴巴我们将做成怎么样？我想，从黄页的时候我就提过，黄页属于。如果说第一，我们把阿里巴巴定位，就把它作为国际战略。 我们不要把它定为是国内战略。第二个呢，我想就是我们要学会硅谷的这种拼劲。
طبعا هذه الفعالية من سلسلة المتحدثين اللي تصير بشكل دوري عندنا. مهمة جدا بالنسبة لرواد الأعمال أن يسمعون من ناس ذو خبرة على مستوى عالمي راح يفيدهم بشكل كبير خاصة في سوق التجارة الإلكترونية.
Marketplace for global trade. Now, a lot of our competitors at the time were trying to build these fancy technical platforms that.
Okay. Yeah, hi, I'm Porter Arisman. I'm very excited to be addressing Cubic today. I'm going to be sharing my experience of what it was like to work inside Alibaba Group as it grew from a small apartment into a global company. I'm going to be talking about the way e-commerce is reshaping the global economic landscape and talk about the 40 lessons that I learned from Alibaba and how entrepreneurs here in Qatar can learn from these experiences.
Thank you.
No, people don't want to sell used goods and people don't want to buy used goods at that time. We realized what we needed to do was take that sort of soup type of retailer and build a website for them. So we created something called Taobao, which means search for treasure. And not to take this analogy too far, but truly, it really is like soup waqif kind of feeling. It was, in a lot of ways, wild, wild west. Just buyers and sellers would come, sellers could set up a shop, tiny little shop sometimes, and sometimes it was a student, or maybe it was a mom who had free time on her hands during the day, and so they built these shops.
السلام عليكم، معكم أخوكم ماجد الخليفي رئيس قسم الاحتضان في حاضنة قطر للأعمال. بخصوص برنامج التصنيع الانسيابي، هو برنامج راح يتخصص في تعليم أصحاب المصانع الصغيرة في دولة قطر رحلتهم خلال إنشاء المصانع في دولة قطر. فراح ناخذهم في دروس نظرية ودروس عملية إن شاء الله لمدة تتراوح بين 4 إلى 6 أسابيع إن شاء الله. برنامج راح يكون مفيد جدا جدا جدا. راح نجيب خبرات من برا، من اليابان ومن بعض الدول المجاورة. فإن شاء الله راح تستفيدون إن شاء الله، ويشرفنا حضوركم بإذن الله.
Finally, you not only have a deal, you also maybe have a new friend. Well, this is how it worked in China, where what happened was actually on our website, it was so social that couples were actually meeting through it. So Taobao, we had to create a special section of that you can see what you think. But in emerging markets, I've seen that trust really flows through relationships. This is how people do deals. And so, at least in China, the trust with your family is really strong. And that's why one reason you see a lot of family businesses. I'm not totally sure, I'm a little nervous. And then you get to strangers and people, in China at the time, they wouldn't even do a deal. So what did we do to address that? Every problem is an opportunity for an entrepreneur. We added an extra step of an escrow. And what that meant was that we held the money until the buyer looked at the product, said they liked it. And then if the buyer said, yeah, this is what I expected, this isn't a fake good, this is real, this is good quality, then the money would be forwarded to the seller.
طبعا بالإضافة إلى سيد بورتر وكلمته اليوم معنا، راح نعلن عن إطلاق برنامجين جداد. واحد اللي هو برنامج التصنيع الانسيابي وبرنامج المرشد الانسيابي. كلهم راح يضيفون بشكل كبير لمنظومة ريادة الأعمال في قطر. طبعا برنامج التصنيع الانسيابي يستهدف بشكل رئيسي رواد الأعمال في مجال التصنيع، والمرشد الانسيابي راح تكون مفيدة جدا من ناحية انك تستفيد من اصحاب ورواد الاعمال الحاليين كيف ممكن انهم هم يقدمون الارشاد المناسب والصحيح للشركات الناشئة الجديدة ورواد الاعمال الموجودين عندنا.
Negotiate, haggle, go to Taobao. If you want big famous brands that you can trust from the vendors themselves, the actual brands, go to Tmall. And Tmall, by the way, is what drove the step to the lessons. Okay, I think that's equally important. You can't understand the lessons without the story, the business story. But let me talk about the lessons that I learned from the experience and some of the trends happening in e-commerce instead of go to Walmart. But in China, it's the main way people will do business. And let me give you one example. So my friends in the U.S., when I go to dinner with them, we want to split the bill. So we get the bill, and everyone pulls out their credit card, and then the waiter or waitress And so what I've seen is that there's more to learn from China in emerging markets than from the U.S. And here's what, I don't have all 40 lessons for you here, but I'll give you some of the highlights that I think are relevant here of 40 lessons that I hope you walk away with.